Dear friends, welcome to the channel, The Eastern Front. Today we will talk about the photos of two Red Army soldiers before the execution. These photos were taken by one of the participants in the execution of soldiers on the Kola Peninsula at the end of June 1941. The pictures of the shooting came to Russia in the 90s. The Norwegians handed over historical books about the war in the Arctic to the residents of Murmansk. According to them, the photos were obtained from a German veteran, who himself witnessed the execution of Russian fighters. A military clash in the mountains at an altitude of 122 in June 1941 is one of the favorite military stories of local historians. The goal of the wehrmacht on the northern front was to capture the ice-free port of Murmansk and the strategic Murmansk-Leningrad railway. Due to the fierce Russian resistance, the war in the north took on the protracted character and continued until the surrender of Finland in 1944. The height 122 was in the way of the German troops' offensive on Murmansk. From afar, the Germans saw movement on the ridge and sent a reconnaissance group to clarify the situation. When the scouts reached the mountain ridge, there were explosions of hand grenades and machine gun volleys. Realizing that the reconnaissance group was ambushed, the Germans immediately attacked the height. A heavy hand-to-hand battle ensued with the defenders of Murmansk, among whom presumably was the soldier Sergei Korolev. At night, mountain riflemen stormed the height. The resistance of the Red Army was fierce in this battle. A company of rangers under the command of Lieutenant Rode lost a lot of people. At 6 in the morning, the Germans broke the resistance and took the height. Here is the beginning of the tragic plot with the shooting of Russian soldiers. In Hans Ruff's book, the Soviet fighters are described as barbarians and cowards who fight not according to military laws. Ruff claims that the Russians ruthlessly destroyed the prisoners, finishing off the survivors. German officers, according to Ruff, were seized with deep indignation. They staged a demonstrative execution of Soviet prisoners, presenting it as an act of revenge. Every step of the execution is carefully recorded in the photo. The capture of Korolev and his comrade, interrogation, preparation for execution, the bodies of the dead on the stone. Such a story appears in the Ruff's book. Judging by the memoir and the photographs, the prisoners knew that there would be no mercy for them, but they held themselves courageously, both in their posture and in their gaze. The Russians understood perfectly well why they would be shot, recalled a veteran of the German Mountain Rifle Corps. After execution, our commander sent all the recordings and film to the headquarters. Until today, no one knew either the place of events or the names of the dead Red Army soldiers. However, the Murmansk search squad found the bodies of the Soviet prisoners of war, those whose famous pictures were published in books and albums dedicated to the Second World War. In one of the summers, a group of Russian historians reconstruct the events of 1941 in the Arctic, repeating the route of the 2nd Mountain Division of the Wehrmacht to the Titovka River. The group, in full uniform of the Great Patriotic War, walked 80 kilometers, and on the last day of the journey found itself at the supposed place of the execution of Soviet prisoners of war. We have been studying the plot from German photos for a long time and assumed that it unfolded in our north. We calculated the approximate search area, and within the help of the local history expedition Titovsky Road, we tried to establish the place of death of the fighters from the photos, says Dmitry Dulich, a military historian and local historian from Murmansk, who had been searching for the place of execution for several years. On the last day of the expedition, the group came to a clearing surrounded by stones of recognizable shape. The reconciliation of the landscape with the photographs left no doubt that it was here that Soviet soldiers were shot 72 years ago. Murmansk search squad Alexander Poruchikov and Nikolai Grishenko came to the aid of the local historian. The excavations didn't last long. 2 days later, the searchers found the remains of soldiers shot here in the first days of the war in the 41st. The ground was literally touched with fingers. There were also soldiers' medallions, says Dulich. The fact that the execution of the fighters is recorded in the photo and preserved in the archives makes the finding of the Murmansk search squad unique. Indeed, it's very rare that field work is correlated with the archival document. We can assume that a separate military episode, the story of two human destinies, has now been completed, Dmitry Dulich believes. Geographically, the place from the photos is located in the foothills of the Master Tundra Ridge at an altitude of 122. The same relief of the clearing with a small growth, the same arrangement and shape of the stones as in the photo 72 years ago. Time has erased the traces of the tragedy, but the rocky landscape has remained unchanged. By the way, on my channel there's an interesting video about the protection of the Master Tundra Ridge. Link will appear at the end of the video. After the discovery of the remains of the soldiers, Murmansk search squad deciphered the medallion of one of them and began searching for relatives of Private Sergei Korolkov. In 1946, Korolkov's wife applied to the commissariat of the Dzerzhinsky district looking for her husband. At that time, she was living with her sister and raising a 6-year-old daughter. In the military enlistment office, Ekaterina Korolkova was told that her husband was missing. From the soldier's medallion and the archives found, it's known that Korolkov was born in 1912, lived on the territory of the present Tver region. In the pre-war 40th year, Korolkov had a daughter. On 23 June 1941, he volunteered for the front, and a week later, defending the Murmansk, he was shot at the 122nd height. 72 years later, the Murmansk search squad found the remains of volunteer Korolkov, completing his biography. After the publication of information about the found fighter, the closest relatives of the deceased Korolkov were found: his 73-year-old daughter Nina Krylova and 6 grandchildren who live in the villages of the Andriapolsk district of the Tver region. His photos have not been preserved in the family album. The daughter, who didn't know her father, will see him for the first time in the famous photographs taken by the Germans at the time of the execution. It's known that of the 2 fighters in the photo, Korolkov is the overcaught. Dear friends, that's all for today. It was Tim and the Eastern Front channel. I would be glad to get any comments from you and likes. And as usual, I wish you peace and health. See you.